The rain fell in fine needles over the city of white stone. Gas lamps shimmered through the mist. Cobblestones gleamed like polished bone. In a narrow street near the river stood an old building with a crooked sign that read, Holloway Company. Fine portraits. Inside, a painter sat alone before an unfinished canvas. His name was Julian Holloway, and he had once been the city's most sought-after artist. But not anymore. His last painting, a portrait of a young heiress, had ended in tragedy. The girl had vanished the night it was finished. That was 5 years ago. Now, Julian's studio smelled of turpentine and regret. He stared at the empty canvas, brush trembling in his hand. Every night he dreamed of faces that wouldn't fade. Every morning, the same letter on his desk, you owe one more painting. The final commission. Come to Blackmere Manor. He tried to ignore it, but the envelope kept returning, no matter how many times he burned it. So at last, one grey afternoon, he packed his brushes and boarded the train. The countryside slid by in streaks of green and smoke. He arrived at dusk. A carriage waited for him, driven by a man in a dark coat. Mr. Holloway, the man asked. Julian nodded. Then you expected. The road wound through forest, rain tapping against the windows. When the trees broke, he saw it, Blackmere Manor, towering over the lake like a memory that refused to die. Its reflection shimmered on the dark water. Lightning flashed. And for a heartbeat, he thought he saw another house beneath the surface, an inverted twin. The doors opened before he could knock. A woman stood there. She was tall, poised, dressed entirely in mourning black. I'm Lady Evangeline Blackmere, she said. Her eyes were the color of the lake, cold and deep. Thank you for coming, Mr. Holloway. My husband insisted that only you could capture what must be painted. Julian frowned. Your husband? Her lips curved faintly. Yes. Though he's been dead 2 months. He hesitated. I don't paint ghosts, my lady. She smiled. Then paint his truth. The manor was vast and silent. Portraits lined the halls, faces of the Blackmere lineage, all pale and watchful. A clock somewhere struck 8. Julian's footsteps echoed against marble floors. Lady Evangeline led him to a grand chamber lit by candlelight. At its center stood a covered easel. This is where you'll work, she said. He nodded, setting down his bag. May I see the subject? In the morning, she replied. When the light is kind. She turned to leave. Then paused. If you hear footsteps at night, ignore them. The house remembers too much. That night, Julian could not sleep. Wind howled through the chimneys. Once, he thought he heard the sound of dripping water. Then, faintly, a voice. A man's voice, whispering his name. He lit a candle and followed the sound down the corridor. It led to the locked door at the far end. The handle was cold. He bent close, listening. Nothing. When he turned to go, he saw a painting hanging opposite, a portrait of a woman whose eyes seemed alive. It was Evangeline, younger, smiling faintly. In the corner of the canvas, a signature not his own, Nathaniel Blackmere. The husband had been a painter too. At breakfast, Evangeline greeted him with calm detachment. You didn't sleep, she said. He shook his head. The house is loud. It mourns, she said simply. Like all of us. She led him to the studio again. The covered easel waited. When she lifted the cloth, Julian froze. The canvas beneath was already painted, half finished, a man's face emerging from the shadows. Nathaniel Blackmere. The brushstrokes were sharp, desperate, as though clawed into the paint. Your husband began it? Julian asked. Evangeline nodded. On the night he died. How? They found him by the lake. He'd gone out to paint the moonlight. The next morning, his easel was empty. Julian studied the canvas. There was something wrong with it, a shimmer. As if the surface moved. He reached out. The paint was dry. But cold. "Finish it," she said softly. "Let him rest." Days passed. Julian painted. Though unease coiled in his stomach. Every evening, Evangeline watched from the doorway, silent, unreadable. He caught himself glancing toward her too often. Her beauty was haunted, fragile. Her sadness, magnetic. Once, he asked about the locked room at the end of the corridor. She froze. That was his studio, she said. No one goes there. That night, Julian dreamed of a man painting in the dark. The brush moved on its own, forming eyes that blinked open from the canvas. He awoke to find his hand stained with paint, though he hadn't touched a brush. On the fourth day, the weather changed. Fog rolled off the lake like smoke. Julian worked alone. As he painted, he noticed something strange. Each time he mixed a new color, the face in the portrait seemed to shift slightly. At first, subtle. Then, unmistakable. The mouth changed shape. The eyes moved. And once, he swore the figure blinked. He dropped the brush. When he looked again, the portrait was still. Only his own reflection stared back from the glassy surface. Evangeline entered quietly. "You captured him," she whispered. Julian shook his head. "Captured isn't the word." She placed a hand on his arm. "Sometimes we must imprison what refuses to die." That evening, a storm broke. Rain lashed the windows. Julian sat by the fire, staring at the portrait. The painted Nathaniel seemed alive in the flickering light. A knock sounded. Evangeline entered, holding a candle. She wore no mourning veil tonight. "You've almost finished," she said softly. He nodded. "Then you'll tell me the truth." She tilted her head. "About what?" "About how he died." Her smile faltered. "Some truths paint themselves, Mr. Holloway." Before he could reply, the fire went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Then, from somewhere near the canvas, a whisper, "Evangeline." The candle trembled in her hand. Julian grabbed her wrist. The whisper came again, louder now, a man's voice, unmistakably real. She dropped the candle. And the room filled with moving shadows. When he relit the flame, the portrait had changed. The man's eyes now looked directly at them. And painted on the wall behind him was the reflection of a woman, Evangeline herself. She backed away, trembling. "No," she whispered. "Not again." The next morning, she claimed not to remember the night. But Julian could not forget. The voice. The shifting paint. The expression of pure hate in the painted man's face. He resolved to open the locked studio. When he found the key, hidden in a drawer, it was wrapped in black ribbon. The door creaked open to reveal a room thick with dust and decay. Half-finished canvases leaned against the walls, all portraits of Evangeline. In each one, her smile changed subtly. In some, she looked frightened. In others, furious. On the last canvas, her hands were around a man's throat. Julian stepped back, heart pounding. Behind him, the floorboard groaned. He turned. Evangeline stood there, face pale as porcelain. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "Did you kill him?" Julian asked. Her eyes filled with tears. "I loved him," she said. "That wasn't my question." She closed her eyes. "He said the paintings would outlive us both. That they could trap a soul. I told him to stop." He laughed. "That night, I threw his easel into the lake." Her voice broke. When I looked again, he was gone. Only the painting remained. Julian swallowed hard. The one I'm finishing now. She nodded slowly. It's him, Mr. Holloway. What's left of him? That night, the storm returned. Julian could not stay away from the canvas. He stared at it until midnight. Then, suddenly, the painted eyes opened. A hand, painted yet solid, reached out from the frame. He stumbled back. The voice whispered, "Finish me." The brush lifted on its own, dipped into the paint, and began moving. Julian watched in horror as his own hand joined it, painting furiously, helplessly. The figure grew clearer, more real. The smell of the lake filled the room. Evangeline burst in, screaming his name. The portrait glowed, light pouring from the canvas. She seized his arm. "Stop! You'll free him." But it was too late. The glass cracked. A shape stepped through, dripping water, eyes black as the lake. Nathaniel Blackmere stood before them, alive and dead all at once. "You tried to drown me," he said to Evangeline. She shook her head. "You trapped yourself." He reached for her throat. Julian grabbed the lamp and hurled it at the canvas. Flames erupted. Nathaniel howled, retreating toward the firelight. Evangeline collapsed. Julian dragged her toward the door as the studio burned. The house screamed, wood splitting, glass shattering. They stumbled into the rain. Behind them, the windows glowed with orange fire. Then, with a roar, the roof caved in. The reflection in the lake burned like a second sun. By morning, nothing remained but ashes and the faint smell of turpentine. Evangeline knelt beside the ruins. "It's over," she whispered. Julian stared at the blackened frame half buried in mud. The canvas was gone. Only shards of glass remained, each reflecting a different face. He turned away. "I'm done painting," he said. She looked up at him, eyes hollow. "Then you'll forget me too." He hesitated. "I couldn't, even if I wanted to." They parted at the station. Julian boarded the morning train, carrying nothing but his brushes. Evangeline disappeared into the fog. Years passed. He never painted again. But sometimes, in his dreams, he saw the reflection of a lake, still, dark, waiting. And beneath it, a pale hand pressing upward, trying to break through the glass.